Hey there, it's Steve from Serious Keto, and this is the Not So Serious Keto video podcast. I want to start out this podcast by revisiting and expanding on a topic from last week, and that topic is the potential end of this podcast, at least as it exists in its current format. So when I talked about this last week, first off, this wasn't like a cry for help. This wasn't me fishing for compliments, although I do appreciate the very kind words so many of you said to me in your comments last week. But some of you thought that this meant that Serious Keto was coming to an end. Serious Keto is not coming to an end. I cannot foresee a day when I don't want to do this anymore, unless it's me just leaving the internet entirely, which I guess is a possibility, because sometimes I do get a little bit sick of the internet in general and the behavior on the internet. But that is an entirely different topic. Serious Keto is not coming to an end. As for the podcast, I'm still kind of trying to work through what I want to do with it. As I had mentioned last week, it is difficult to keep coming up with topics week in and week out and trying to fill up like 15 to 20 minutes. I feel that's sort of the ideal podcast length, so you can listen to it on a commute or while doing chores or something like that. It's tough, and especially now as we're approaching 4 years that I've been doing this podcast, it's especially tough, I think, as a one-person show. I think if you've got two people that can sit together and have a conversation, it becomes a lot easier. However, whenever I've done interview videos in place of my podcast videos, not only do they get the fewest number of views, they get the highest percentage of dislikes of any of my videos. I'm not sure why, because I feel like all the people I've interviewed, they're some of my favorite people, and I would think then that you would like those people as well, but who knows? So back to the podcast. Some of the possibilities. I had mentioned this last week. One is doing individual topics, not reaction videos so much, because I don't want to play off of someone else's video, but whether it's reacting to a story in the news that's sort of keto in the news or health related, that I don't know, because I've already built that into this podcast from time to time. One of the things that I'm considering, and hear me out on this before you jump to any conclusions, I often look at Alton Brown as sort of a bit of a mentor. He hasn't agreed to this, but I look to him both in terms of some of the things that I feel he has done really well and some of the things that I feel were perhaps missteps career-wise. And one of the things that he did for a while, I think he ended it in 2017 or 2018, he had the Alton Brown podcast. And he would touch, a little bit on food, but also just other things sort of going on in his life. It was more of a getting to know Alton a little bit more. So he might talk about family, he might talk about his daughter, he might talk about a book he's read or a movie that he's seen. But I've always considered him an interesting enough person and a very cerebral person, a person that I can learn from, that I really enjoyed those. And it didn't feel like he was going outside of his swim lane for me on that. Conversely, I have seen other YouTube channels that I tuned in for a specific reason. It could be a musician, it could be someone talking about a particular piece of software that I use, or a video game that I enjoy, or it could be a keto channel. And at some point they decided to kind of divert from that. Maybe a little bit, maybe a lot, and at that point I lost interest because I was more interested in their content. I was interested in that deliverable than the actual creator. Now there are other people, I mentioned Alton Brown, there are other people, musicians, artists, etc., that I like them enough as the person that they are, or the person that they project themselves to be on camera, that I do want to know more about them. I want to get a little bit deeper into their life. And to that end, that may be what the Not So Serious Keto video podcast becomes. Certainly there will still be me talking about keto or me talking about nutrition or health or exercise. It could be me responding to a recent study on keto or some sweetener or whatever. But I think it would be easier for me to continue the podcast if I didn't feel quite so constrained by simply it being keto. So by maybe sharing a book that I've read recently that's either good and I recommend and here's why, or bad and I don't recommend and here's why, or a movie I've seen, or just something I've tried, just a little bit more about me. The thing that kind of keeps me from doing that, or has kept me from doing that in the past, is early on in the podcast, whenever I would divert from something that was purely keto or dietary, I would get rather negative comments from that. Like, shut up, we don't care about you, we just want to hear about keto, stay on topic. But as I got to thinking, you know what, if that's the way someone feels about me, do I even care if they watch this channel or not? I don't know. I'm sort of debating. I think bigger picture, if you think metaphorically of serious keto as like a restaurant, and you go into a restaurant and you look at the menu, you're not going to choose everything to eat. You may pick and choose. Who knows? Maybe it becomes your favorite restaurant and you do order everything off the menu eventually. But there may be a couple of things that you really like and those become your go-to things. Maybe those are the cooking videos, maybe those are the review videos or the blood glucose testing videos, or who knows, maybe it's just the podcast. That's maybe the main thing you're interested in. Maybe you've moved on from keto. I don't like saying it that way. Maybe you've moved away from keto either to some other form of low carb, or maybe you've gone stricter and gone carnivore. And as such, perhaps maybe my recipes or product reviews aren't as pertinent to you, but maybe you still like me, and that's why you tune into the podcast. So I guess it's too late for me to say long story short, because I've already turned this into a long story. I don't fully foresee the podcast going away. I do see it changing a little bit, or perhaps a lot. And to that end, I foresee maybe some other changes in the channel. Now, this is not going to go to a slice of life sort of channel. It's still going to be keto recipes, some keto product reviews, but maybe there'll be some other stuff as well. And I spent the last week really kind of trying to figure out why am I feeling this. I don't know if it's frustration or anxiety or a 7-year itch or whatever you want to call it. But as I started thinking about it, I think a lot of it comes from my history in corporate America, especially the 20 or so years I spent at General Electric. And I started at GE back in the Jack Welch days, where it was a dog-eat-dog company, very alpha, even internally. And when I describe working at GE, especially during the Welch years, it's like the story of the two cavemen who are being chased by a saber-toothed tiger, and one says to the other, "How are we going to outrun this tiger?" And the other caveman says, "I don't have to outrun the tiger. I just have to outrun you." That's what working at GE was like. And there was this mentality that if you spent more than 2 years in a role and you weren't making some sort of upward movement, there's something wrong with you. You lack the ambition. You lack the fire in your belly to be true GE. And I think with 20 years of that instilled in me, I started finding myself here, now at 5.5 years of doing serious keto, thinking, do I need to do something else? I don't want to stop doing this because I love this, but do I need to start creating something different within serious keto to kind of keep things fresh for myself? So to that end, one of the things that I'm considering, and I know I've pushed back on requests for me to do these sort of videos a lot, is what I eat in a week. And what I'm not going to do in these is try and shoehorn in a bunch of extraneous sort of stuff, like, oh, here's me at Colton's soccer game for 15 minutes of footage, and then I had hot dogs. No, it's going to be more focused probably on, a couple of minutes of me prepping the food, maybe less, and then here's what it is, some money shots, camera panning around of whatever it is. And then what I think this could potentially do is be a feeder for you to give me input as to what you would like to see in recipe videos. So if you see a certain thing that I make and you start to see just how I eat on a normal everyday basis and how I sustain my keto, you may say, wow, that looks really good and I haven't seen a recipe for that. Would you do a recipe video on that? So that's a possibility as one of the other future videos on this channel as well. One of the things though that I'm not going to do, and I've tried to make this pretty clear, is I'm never going to put serious keto ahead of my family. I did that way too much in my career. There are a lot of parts of my children's growing up that I missed, and I'm not going to make that mistake with my grandsons. Sorry about that. My daughter keeps texting me. I'm trying to sell a TV out on Facebook, and she's sort of coordinating all of that. There's a little slice of life for you, a little behind the scenes with Steve. Oh, so what I'm saying is I'm not going to make the same mistake with my grandchildren that I made climbing the corporate ladder. And if that means a few less videos from time to time, so be it. Because it'll mean less stress for me. I'll feel congruent with what I'm doing, sort of work-life balance, and that will also cut down on the stress for me, cut down on the potential risk of burnout. So that is my update, and that's also probably going to be pretty close to the end of this podcast. Now, I'm not sure how good a job I'm going to be doing responding to your comments over the next couple of days, Monday and Tuesday, because as I mentioned last week, Monday, which would be today, if you're watching it on Monday the 14th, is Terry's and my 28th anniversary. We've been together 30 and a half years, but this is 28 for the anniversary. And then the next day is our birthday. So we're going on a little bit of a spa trip. We probably can't afford it, but we're doing it anyway. And I'll just be chillaxing in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin at some spa resort thing for a couple of days. So as a result, unless I have some downtime and it's not something that would take away from the experience or take away from time with Terry, I probably won't be answering a lot of comments. Unless maybe just giving him some quick hearts or something like between massages or whatever I'm getting done, whatever Terry signed me up for. But that, all of you wonderful folks, is going to be the end of this podcast. I'm glad I had a chance to get this off my chest. I feel a lot more upbeat and enthusiastic about the future of serious keto now that I've had a week to really kind of think through some things. So I look forward to spending at least another 5.5 years with all of you and doing some sort of a podcasty thing in one form or another. As always, thanks for listening, and thanks for watching.